Have you heard the rumour that's going around a little bit? It's kind of, some of you might get a bit nervous when someone says that. Have you heard the rumour? It's been going around, and I can tell you what it is. It's that Christians are respectable and have it all together. Okay, have you heard that rumour? I don't know where it came from. I don't really know when it started, but it kind of goes around. Maybe you've picked it up in places you've been to. It's complete rubbish for lots of reasons. But it's interesting, isn't it? Like, we're wearing masks, or you're all wearing masks, and it's a good thing to do. It's safer for us who wear masks, and it's kind to other people to wear masks. But I don't know if you've kind of reflected on masks recently, and I have, and it just seems that actually, in a lot of ways, we all tend to wear masks. Like, literally, we have to wear masks now. But isn't it the case that many of us wear masks to disguise ourselves, to hide our true selves from each other? Like, even in church sometimes, don't we? We wear different kinds of masks. Maybe you've been wearing a mask for years in your workplace. In church, when you come to church, you've been wearing a mask to sort of hide or disguise what you're really like. The reason we do that, I think, is because we buy into that rumour. We buy into that rumour that Christians are respectable and have it all together. We buy into the rumour that really being a Christian means that there's no dramas. Being a Christian means that there's no worries, and it's absolute rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. Don't believe a word of it. Being respectable and having it all together is not the entry point of Christianity. Okay? It's not a condition of acceptance, and it's not even really part of the journey of being a Christian. And today I'll tell you why. We're going to focus on an event that should take your breath away. It's a legal drama. Everyone loves legal dramas, or most people like legal dramas. It's a legal drama. There's goodies, there are baddies, there's sex, and there's shame, and there's scandal, there's hypocrisy. These are the kind of things that you get every show on Netflix. It's just a Netflix bonanza, all of the things that we're going to see in our story this afternoon. But in the story, we're going to feel and see Jesus' heartbeat. We're going to see how he really feels about people at their worst and lowest. But we're also going to see how he really feels about people who think that they have it all together. Now, this event that we're going to look at is in the beginning of John chapter 8. We're going to walk through the story in a moment. But before we get there, I need to mention one thing about it. So if you open your Bible, get your Bible app, open to John chapter 8, what you'll find are brackets. You'll see some kind of box, some kind of line, something that separates today's event from the rest of the chapter. And there is a reason. And I promise you it's not a conspiracy. So this is what happened. So the Apostle John, he was a friend and a follower of Jesus. He wrote his good news account of Jesus, called it the Gospel of John, or someone called it the Gospel of John. Good news written by John about Jesus. Someone thought it was so good that they copied it out by hand and they passed it around to their friends. And that kind of kept on going. Other people thought it the same. They copied it out by hand, passed it around, copied it out, passed it around. And they were meticulous, they were accurate, they were respectful. And in the earliest of these manuscripts, they're called, in the earliest of those that we have in museums and libraries and different collections around the world, the earliest ones don't have the story that we're looking at this afternoon. Why? Well, we don't really know. John almost certainly didn't write it. But somehow it's found its way into the document that we call John's Gospel, because actually it fits. It really fits. It fits with other parts of John's Gospel, and it massively fits with what we see in the other three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Because in our story that we'll look at today, what we learn about Jesus tallies with everything we discover about Jesus elsewhere. But it also tallies with everything the story tells us about people that we find out elsewhere, especially self-righteous people. Now, I have no doubt that this story really happened. Every trustworthy Bible scholar that I could find believes that this event happened. So we can trust the story and we can trust the Bible. And I'm very happy to talk with any of you really later if you have any questions about this, if you want to ask any questions about that, how the Bible kind of is put together and all those kind of things. If you've got any questions, I'd love to talk with you afterwards or during the week. But the text, the story, asks us a question too. How is it that a woman caught red-handed in the act of serious sin, someone who's the very definition of not respectful, how is it that someone like that gets closer to Jesus' heart than a group of respectable, moral, altogether religious leaders? How is that possible? How does that happen? Well, the answer, the story that we'll see, will take your breath away. So John chapter 8. Have a look at verse 2. It's early morning. Jesus is back in the temple, teaching a big crowd. Okay, there's nothing breathtaking so far, is there? That's just like a completely normal day. It's a day like any other for Jesus, teaching people in or around the temple, completely normal, until verse 3. So imagine the scene. Try and put yourself in the scene. Get your kind of movie in and get in the scene. You've got a crowd of people huddled around Jesus, listening to a sermon, listening to some kind of seminar, some kind of teaching. And then suddenly the religious leaders just barge right in. They frog march a woman into the centre of the crowd, nostrils flaring, pulses raising. This woman has sinned. You can imagine the pointing, can't you? Like there's just a lot of pointing. You can imagine, can't you, the anger, the judgment, the red faces. They found a woman caught in the act, red-handed, and they are angry. Imagine the crowds. Where are they looking? Who are the crowd looking at? Well, they're looking at her, aren't they? All eyes on her, right? Now, I have no idea what state she was in. I have no idea what clothes she was wearing or not wearing. I don't know what she was kind of like in any way at all. But obviously, everyone is staring at her. And not in a good way. Imagine the woman herself. What's she feeling? What's she doing? There is nowhere worse for her to be than there in that moment, in that crowd. There's nowhere worse for her to be. It's as if this scarlet letter is branded on her forehead. There's no hole big enough for her to hide in, is there? Adultery in the Bible is a serious crime, and she is in deep, deep trouble. She's surrounded, she's vulnerable, she's guilty, she's shameful, feeling utterly condemned. Where do you think she's looking? Anywhere but up, I guess. Anywhere but up. So the Pharisees put her in the middle, centre of attention. They pause for dramatic effect, and then they say these words. Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Can you imagine the boos and the hisses. Now, they say, in the law Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? I heard a story, a few times I've heard it, and it's about a woman from North Africa, a Muslim woman from North Africa, and she had somehow got her hands on John's Gospel, copy of John's Gospel, and she would read it little bit by little bit secretly. So she would kind of be able to read a few paragraphs quickly, close it, put it away, hide it, and then a bit later on, the next day, maybe later on in the week, she'd be able to go back to it, open it up, read it. And as she was reading through John's Gospel, she was really intrigued. She was intrigued with what she was reading, intrigued with Jesus, this teacher. And so she kept reading secretly, little bit by little bit by little bit. And she got to John 8, verse 5, what we just read. She read those verses. She closed up the book that she had, and she put it back where she got it from. Just disappointed. Maybe angry, but certainly disappointed. Because she knew what would happen. She knew the end of the story from her experience of men, especially from her experience of religiously powerful men. She knew how the story was going to end. So she closed it, disappointed, and hid it away, walked off. So back in the scene, we have the firing squad ready. The bricks are loaded, and it's up to Jesus what happens next. If he tells them to let her off, well, he's in trouble because he's putting himself above the law, right? He's putting himself above the law, but not for the first time. I mean, he's already in trouble for breaking the Sabbath. He's already in trouble for calling God his Father. The religious leaders are already trying to kill him for saying that he's equal to God. We've seen that over the last few weeks, I think. And so he's already in trouble with them. So if he says, let her off, that kind of final nail in the coffin almost, isn't it? But then the alternative then is, what, to condemn her and say, yeah, okay, go ahead. She deserves to be stoned. Let the bricks go. Well, then if he agrees that, then he's really putting himself firmly on the side of the religious leaders that he's been having a problem with for a year. He will lose any popularity he has with the crowd, and probably even gets into trouble with the Roman occupying forces because they banned a religious execution. So he was kind of in this three-way battle. Like, what's he going to do? Who's he going to go with? Who's he going to side with? Whose side is he on in this whole story? Is he going to let her off? Or is he going to condemn her to death? Jesus does something a bit weird. He bends down and he starts writing with his finger in the ground. Just writing. Understandably, the religious leaders are not happy. That just makes them even more angry. So you can imagine them just shouting at Jesus more. Oh, come on, Jesus, stop doodling. We're just wasting time. Come on, we've got the bricks ready. Why are you in the ground? Like, they're ready. She's there. We're ready. What do you say? Come on, you've got to give us an answer. You can't stop wasting time. Stop doodling. Give us an answer. So Jesus stops that. He stands up and look at what he says. Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And then he just bends down and starts writing again. And as he's writing, thud. One brick falls to the floor. The oldest Pharisee starts walking away sheepishly. Jesus keeps writing. Thud. Another brick. Another teacher of the law follows. Thud. Thud. More bricks, one by one, then faster and faster, until all bricks are on the floor and there's only two people left in the group. Now, there's a very pressing question that I want to ask you at this point in the story. You ready? How much would you pay to find out what Jesus wrote on the floor? How much would you pay? Like, how many, just what would you do to find out what he wrote on the floor? Seriously. Some people, kind of looking into this, some people say that he could have been writing down the 10 Commandments on the floor. And that's really interesting because in Exodus, we're told that the 10 Commandments themselves were written by the finger of God in the stone tablets. And here in this story we have Jesus kind of writing with his finger. Could be. I read some people think that he could have been writing the names of all the Pharisees' mistresses. Can you imagine that? I think that's probably quite unlikely. That'd be a little bit explosive, wouldn't it? That would get attention, wouldn't it? The truth is we don't know. The writer doesn't tell us what Jesus was writing in the floor. But whatever he was writing in that dust and in that dirt, it was his words that changed the situation, didn't they? Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Where's everybody looking now? it's a fascinating thing to think about, because just in that one sentence, that one short sentence, Jesus has turned the accuser's gaze off the woman and onto himself. Or really, he's turned their gaze onto themselves and their hearts, right? That's what he's done. Who's looking at the woman now? Well, no one. Until in verse 9, you just have two people. You have Jesus alone with the woman caught in adultery. Here's another question for you. How do you imagine, or how would you imagine verse 10? If you kind of cover up the rest of the story before you read on, how would you imagine verse 10? Because I think in many ways we're like the woman in North Africa. Like we know how this story ends usually, don't we? Like we've heard this kind of story too many times. There's a powerful religious man, and there's a vulnerable woman wearing pretty much nothing but shame. Like we know how that story usually ends, don't we? We see it too many times. But even more, like Jesus is the Son of God. He is the only one in that crowd, and the only one in human history that is qualified to have executed that judgment, because he's the only one in the crowd who really is without sin. So how would you imagine verse 10? Do you imagine him as Jesus stands up? Do you imagine him picking up a brick? Do you imagine him poised to point out all her faults, all the ways that she's unworthy, all the ways that she just doesn't have it all together? How do you imagine verse 10? This is what happened. Jesus stood up and he said, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go, and from now on, sin no more." The accusers that dragged her in have all left the building. They looked like they had it all together. They looked like they cared about God's law. They looked like they cared about defending morality. And it's true. It's true that in the law, if a woman, an adulterous woman, should be punished by stoning, but actually so should the guy. Like, where's the guy? Seriously, where is he? You can't commit adultery, like, it takes two, right? So, like, where is he? The whole thing just stinks. It's completely fishy. It's just bizarre. What's clear, though, I think, what's clear is that the woman was really just a pawn. She's just being used. Maybe like she's being used in many other ways in her life. She's just being used by those religious leaders, by powerful men to make a point. She's just being used to get at Jesus. That was all she was there for. But the accusers have left the building, and Jesus looks at the woman. And the woman returns eye contact. Can you imagine what that was like? For the first time in the story, the woman is an actual person. For the first time in the story, the woman is spoken to, not about. For the first time in the story, she has dignity, she has respect, and she has worth. Jesus is the one that's given it to her. He's given all those things to her. It's almost like Jesus has made her human in the story. I want you to notice something really important. Jesus does not say that her adultery doesn't matter. He doesn't excuse what she did. And he never excuses sin. He calls her to leave her life of sin. He says, just stop, just walk away, leave it. Sin no more. Move on from it. And that's really important. It's a really important thing to notice, that Jesus doesn't condone sin in anything that he does. He doesn't say it's excusable or fine or anything. He never excuses it. He always says to leave it, because it's serious. But also he says that It's not the last word. This adultery, this sin that the woman was caught doing, that's not the last word about her. That's not the thing that defines her, according to Jesus. She's in a complete mess. She really is unworthy. She's covered in shame. And Jesus, the true judge, gives her forgiveness. Yeah, it's an incredible story of forgiveness. But it's a story of so much more. Jesus gives her his heart. Jesus gives her life back. But true life. Jesus gives her true worth and true dignity. And the so-called respectable ones are nowhere to be seen. They have long gone. So there are 5 words that I want you to take away from today. 5 words that I think would take our breath away if we really kind of got them in our hearts. 5 words that will melt our hearts. 5 words that invite us into a love that will last. Those 5 words. I will not condemn you. I will not condemn you. Whatever rumours you've heard about Christianity, whoever you are, Jesus says to you, I do not condemn you. I think, just as an aside, as Christians, we probably need to live up to that statement a bit better than we do, don't we? Maybe it's too easy for us in church world to be like those religious leaders, to be the ones that think we have to condemn people. We need to live up to these words of Jesus better ourselves. But even that aside, if you're a woman in this world that is hard to be a woman in, if you're a woman, Jesus says to you, I do not condemn you. If you are someone who has been caught red-handed, Jesus says, I do not condemn you. If you are weighed down by guilt and covered in shame, Jesus says, I do not condemn you. Whatever respectable masks you try and wear, or you try and cover yourself up with, whatever search history you've deleted this lockdown, Jesus says, I do not condemn you. So leave it all behind. Don't wait till you get caught red-handed before coming to Jesus. Leave it now. Like, don't mess around with any kind of sin, especially sexual sin. Just don't mess around. Don't play around with it. Jesus is not weak on adultery. He's not weak on any sin. Just don't mess around. Leave it. He certainly doesn't have any time for self-righteousness either. So if you think you're fine, well, Jesus doesn't really have any time for that. See, we'll see more about this in the next chapter of John, chapter 8. And if you want to read more about Jesus doing this in other times, you can read Luke's Gospel, chapter 7. Around there, you'll see Jesus say similar kind of things to people. But in this story, in this event, Jesus is the only one who could have condemned the woman. But Jesus doesn't throw stones. That's not the kind of God he is. That's not the kind of saviour he is. He doesn't throw stones. It's powerful, isn't it? It's a powerful story. It's kind of a simple story. But it packs a punch. See, whoever you are, whatever you've done, Jesus says to you, makes eye contact with you, looks you in the eye, and he says, I do not condemn you. Not just on a Sunday, when we are wearing masks of all different kinds, but we're kind of well-dressed and behaving ourselves. Not just then, but in the middle of the night when no one else can see you, and your tears are making your pillow wet, in the middle of your mess, maybe even when you've been caught red-handed, where there's no hole big enough to hide in, when everyone else has stared at your mess and has chewed you out and has condemned you, Jesus doesn't. Jesus doesn't condemn you. It's kind of it. He doesn't condemn you. Remember that lady back in North Africa, a Muslim lady that put this story down because she knew how it would end. For some reason, she picked it up again a little bit of time later, and she carried on reading it, and she was so amazed, so shocked to read about Jesus speaking with such tenderness to a woman like this. She was amazed and shocked about the power that he had, the wisdom he had, the care that he had. She was so amazed that on the spot, literally there and then, she gave her heart to Jesus. She gave her life, she gave her mess, and just put it all on Jesus. Because she'd seen something different. She thought she knew how the story ended. Because that's how men act. That's how religious, powerful men act. But that's not how Jesus acts. It's not how Jesus acts at all. She gave her life to Jesus because she realized that Jesus doesn't wait for you to be respectable. He doesn't wait for you to have it all together. I wonder if there's any of you here or on the stream. I wonder if there's any of you who are putting off coming to Jesus because you think he's waiting for you to get everything sorted. Yeah, Jesus is intriguing and he's interesting and I kind of like him and all those kind of things, but I just need to, he's not going to accept me really, is he? Because I need to sort this out, or there's this thing that happened when I was a teenager or at university, or there's just these things going on in my life that aren't right. I just need to wait. But maybe in a few months' time, maybe when lockdown kind of finishes properly, then I'll really make a step to Jesus. There's something that he needs me to do before I get maybe some of you here feel like that. Jesus is not waiting for you to have it all together. But he isn't even waiting for you to mess up, to give him an excuse for him to ditch you. And maybe some of you here and on the stream feel that. You're Christians, you've been a Christian for a long time, you're in with Jesus, but you think about him, you think about the Father, and you just think, yeah, I know they love me because they kind of have to, that's what God does, but he's just waiting. He's just waiting for an excuse just to kick me out. He's just waiting for one more thing, one more failure, one more whatever, one more time, one more try, one more stumble. And then he's going to kick me out. See, Jesus isn't waiting for you to have it all together, and he's not waiting for you to mess up so he can throw you away. That's not the kind of God he is. That's not the kind of Saviour he is. Jesus is not like that. It's okay if you're messy if you go to him. It's okay if you're messy. Think about how that woman must have reacted in that conversation. Just a short, what Jesus says, two lines, two things, three things to her. But he gives her life back. He doesn't condemn her, but he says, go on with your life, but leave your sin behind. Jesus couldn't be clearer about those two things. But what's that woman going to be thinking of? How is she going to be? Is she going to be walking away thinking, okay, I need to leave sin behind. I need to leave sin behind. I don't think that's going to be her first thought, is it? It's going to be, wow, this Jesus. What is he what did he do that for? Wow, he must think some things about me that I don't even believe about myself. Well, I want to know how he ticks. I want to know what his heart is. I want to live like he said to me. I think that's what she's going to be thinking about. See, if you're in a mess, if you're in a mess, or if your mess is all inside that no one knows, that's okay if you go to Jesus. But if you go to Jesus, he will call you to leave your sin behind. But if you go to him, he's not going to condemn you for it. He's not going to throw stones. He's not going to shame you. If you're messy, go to him. If you're thirsty, we've seen this a few times. We were singing about it. We've seen this a few times over the last few weeks in the rest of John's Gospel. If you're thirsty for this kind of love, well, go to Jesus for it. Come to him in your brokenness. Come to him with your brokenness, and he will never shame you. We saw a couple of weeks ago in John chapter 6, Jesus says, Anyone who comes to me, I will not cast out. He doesn't push people away. If you come to him, even in your brokenness, he's not going to shame you. He's not going to turn you away. I wonder how many times you've heard someone say something like that to you. I wonder how many times you've read something like that. I wonder how many more times you need to hear that before you really believe it. Let's say once more, shall we? Just one more time. Just one more time. Jesus does not condemn you. So come to him.